Hey YouTube, Tom itself here. In this video, I want to consider the question, when are we going to see 1080p 60 FPS standard for console games? That seems to be about what your average TV or computer monitor is going to be capable of these days, so why isn't the average console capable of it? There's been a lot of rumbling about how the current console generation of the Xbox One and PS4 are already behind when they come out because they're not capable of this for most games. And the long-term question becomes, well, will the next console generation, whenever that's going to be, will we see 1080p 60 at that point? At a basic level, this is a competition between graphics, resolution, and frame rate. You can have pretty much as you want of any two of those, but as soon as you want some of the third, well, you're looking at making some trade-offs or spending some more money on hardware. As console specs are standardized, developers' hands there are tied. Console gamers' demands and the wild success of Call of Duty has shown that 60 FPS is the mark developers need to be shooting for with action games. Of course, that means making sure frames render twice as fast, a big jump, and so some concessions might have to be made. And on the graphics front, graphics sell games. It's really that simple, isn't it? Got some nice textures, lighting effects, particle, smoke, all that other stuff that we've been working on, bloom, I can't even name it all. Just show off the artist's work that went into the game. That sells games. If the next great new game coming out doesn't look at least as good, preferably better, than the last game that came out, well, that's going to be a hard thing to market. And so it seems like the compromise that gets made is to scale up a slightly lower resolution image. Or maybe they put some black bars above and below. Battlefield 3 and 4 both do this on 360, or like the Order 1887 does it too. Sometimes the image is only scaled in one direction. As I recall, Black Ops 2 was scaled only horizontally, was it? Strange things like that. So the cynic in me says, we'll see higher resolutions when they're required in order to appreciate the improvements to the graphics. On the other hand, it's interesting to see what developers do when they have more pixels to work with. When the 360 first came out, a lot of users were still on composite video, 360p 4:3 resolution. Great, maybe S-Video, 480p or so, still 4:3, but eventually 720 and 1080 16:9 did take over. But that took a while, and so we have a lot of games to look back and compare to see how things were done back when we were on those lower resolutions and 4:3 resolutions. Of course, the unobtrusive text has gotten smaller, but the stuff they want to put up in your face, well, that's just about as big as ever. But what I really want to get to is mid-range optics in FPS games. Seems weird, but stick with me. Higher zoom scopes give you a lot of tunnel vision, but they usually take up most of the whole screen. However, at least in Call of Duty, they also remove your minimap. A mid-range sight like an ACOG in Call of Duty won't take away your minimap, but is also a good compromise between the close range of typically red dot sights and longer range scopes. But if the developers don't give that some serious drawbacks, it's probably going to be by far the best sight in the game. And so what we often see is a large frame on the sight. This makes it more difficult to use at a range closer than what the developers intended. In Call of Duty 4, aesthetically this made some sense because the minimap was just cutting off the corner of the outside of the frame at a 3:4 resolution. The frames aren't so morbidly obese in an appeal to realism, it's game balance. The devs do lots of unrealistic things for the sake of game balance. Moving the camera around so it's closer to that sight, so it appears bigger, would be a small thing, but instead, someone signs off on stuff like this. And it seems so consistent through the FPS games that I've played that I think this has to be the reason. In fact, if I put that COD 4 ACOG up against the ACOG that's been standard since Modern Warfare 2 and keep the pixels the same size on the screen, there hasn't been much change in how much space is actually inside the sight. So that's just one example in how devs have put their additional pixels to use in, well, unexpected ways. Where this got really annoying for me actually on the 360 was in Battlefield 4 with the SRAW. It's a guided rocket, but there's not quite enough resolution there on the old 360, especially with the lower frame rate, to really see where that rocket is, and it takes a lot of possibilities out. At least I'm watching PC players do things with this that I just cannot do because I can't see what's going on. It's not just the lower frame rate, it's the fact that the circle's only about 500 pixels in diameter for me. I'd compare these design decisions to things I see in Halo, like the battle rifle being huge, and with that lowered reticle, actually you want to zoom in not for the zoom, but because it takes that damn gun model out of the way. Or how when you charge up a plasma pistol, that bright green glare makes you not really want to hold it that long, even though that's really the optimal way to play. I believe Halo 2 on the Master Chief Collection was running at nearly 1080p 60 FPS, but they're rendering both a new version with the better lighting effects and nicer textures, and the old version, so you can switch back and forth between them at any time and get an idea for just how far we've come. Okay, so the small sights probably have some other effects, like making the recoil feel somewhat exaggerated. Hey, at least we're not headed towards idiocracy where the outside border of your screen is entirely ads, at least not on games yet. Or, I know, compare it to sporting events. Whereas cameras and TVs have gotten higher resolution, they've decided to show us more and more of the playing area, and usually more and more of the crowd. The big limitation is being able to pick out the numbers on the players' jerseys, right? Anyway, barring any surprising optimizations, this current console generation, the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, isn't gonna see 1080p 60 FPS as a standard. Well, we didn't even see 60 FPS 720p standard on the previous console generation. The good news is we are getting close, and we can expect the next console generation to actually hit that mark, and probably exceed it. The next big jump is to 4K resolutions, but we're only at 2K right now, and whereas going from 720 to 1080 is not quite doubling the number of pixels, going from roughly 2K to 4K is quadrupling the number of pixels. So as we head that direction, I think the upscaling is going to continue to be a thing. Consoles have started to make 60 FPS pretty standard, but getting higher is likely to remain the area of PC enthusiasts. However, if we see something like G-Sync or similar technologies that allow for varying the frame rate to something other than just 30 or 60, we might see developers choose to fix the resolution and then let the frame rate drop just a little bit if necessary. Right now you get missing frames or screen tearing and it's all just ugly and unpleasant. But we'll just have to wait and see if that becomes widely adopted in TVs and computer monitors. When are new consoles going to come out? Well, that's kind of a long-term question, but my guess is that Microsoft is going to end up feeling that the current Xbox One is underpowered compared to the PlayStation 4 and go ahead and push to move on to the next generation a little bit sooner than the previous. There was such parity between the 360 and PS3, surprisingly, that it made sense for both companies to just sit there on their current offerings. Might not be the case this time around. Anyway, for now I'm going to stick with my opinion that developers will not generally increase resolutions until it's necessary to appreciate the improvements to the graphics. With everything changing during development of a game, that can be kind of a tricky target to hit, but I think that's generally where things are headed. Anyway guys, thanks for watching the video, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Have a gold star, or a silver star, and see whatever's in this sweaty gym bag. Later. Ugh, stupid interface. Golly.